The wind howled through the empty streets as Claire hurried home, her coat pulled tight around her. The city felt different tonight, quieter, heavier, as if something unseen lurked in the shadows. She glanced over her shoulder for the third time in a minute. The street behind her was empty, but the unease clung to her like a second skin. Her apartment was just a few blocks away. She forced herself to walk faster, her boots clicking against the pavement. Every sound, every rustling leaf, every distant footstep sent a shiver down her spine. She told herself it was nothing, just nerves. Then she heard it. A soft scuff of shoes behind her. Claire's heart pounded. She dared a glance back. A dark figure stood beneath the flickering streetlight, motionless. Her breath caught in her throat. Had he been there before? She turned a corner sharply, hoping to shake him off. The entrance to her apartment building was just ahead. She fumbled for her keys, hands trembling, and shoved them into the lock. As she pushed the door open, she took one last look. The man was gone. Inside, the silence was deafening. She locked the door behind her and exhaled shakily. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe. She flipped on the lights and tossed her keys on the counter. The tension in her shoulders began to ease as she moved toward her bedroom. Then, as she reached for the light switch, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "I see you." Claire froze. The apartment felt suddenly too big, too open. Slowly she turned, her eyes scanning every shadow, every doorway. A floorboard creaked behind her. She wasn't alone. Her breath hitched as she turned her head, inch by inch, toward the sound. A cold sweat prickled at her skin. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but she could feel it. Someone was here. Her mind raced. Should she run? Call someone? She backed toward the kitchen, reaching for the biggest knife in the block. The smooth handle was cool in her trembling grip. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Don't move. A chill ran down her spine. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Her legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to stay still. Then she saw it, a shadow shifting beneath her bedroom door. Claire's fingers tightened around the knife. She could feel her breath coming in shallow gasps. Whoever was in her apartment wasn't just watching her. They were waiting. She had to get out. Now, with slow, deliberate movements, she stepped backward toward the door. The floor creaked beneath her and she flinched. The shadow under the bedroom door moved. Then the door handle turned. The sound was barely audible, but it sent a jolt of terror through her body. She didn't wait to see what came next. In one frantic motion, she bolted for the front door, unlocking it in record time and yanking it open. She stumbled into the hallway, heart hammering against her ribs. She turned, expecting to see someone bursting out of her apartment after her, but the door remained ajar. No movement, no sound, just the heavy, suffocating silence. Claire ran. She didn't stop until she was 3 blocks away, panting and shaking as she pulled out her phone. Her fingers fumbled as she dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm. Claire's wasn't. "There's someone in my apartment," she gasped. I don't know who, but they were inside. I ran." "Are you in a safe location?" the operator asked. Claire glanced around the deserted street. Safe? She wasn't sure she'd feel safe anywhere right now. "Stay on the line," the operator continued. "Officers are on their way." She nodded, even though no one could see her. "Okay, but then..." Her phone buzzed again. A new message, unknown number. "You shouldn't have run." Her blood turned to ice. Claire's breath came in short, sharp bursts. Her hands trembled as she stared at the message. Her head snapped up, eyes scanning the shadows around her. Then she saw him, standing at the end of the street. Just standing, watching, and smiling. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears as she locked eyes with the figure at the end of the street. Even from this distance, she could see the faint gleam of teeth in that eerie, unshaken smile. The wind howled around her, lifting strands of her hair as she stood frozen in place. Her phone was still pressed to her ear, but she barely registered the 911 operator's voice.
"Ma'am, are you still there?"
She forced herself to speak. "He's here."
"Who's there?"
"The man, the one who—" She swallowed hard. "He's watching me."
"Can you get to a safe location?"
Claire took a step back, then another. The figure didn't move. He simply stood there, head tilted slightly as if amused. Then, in one slow, deliberate motion, he raised a hand and waved. A cold shiver ripped through her.
"Ma'am,"
the operator's voice urged. Claire's fight or flight instincts screamed at her. She turned and ran. The city blurred around her as she sprinted, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. The pounding of her feet against the pavement drowned out everything else. When she finally reached the police station, she all but collapsed through the doors. An officer behind the desk looked up in alarm. "I need help," she gasped. Someone's following me." The officer stood, concern flashing across his face. "Slow down. Tell me what happened." Claire's hands trembled as she held up her phone, the last message still glowing on the screen. The officer's brow furrowed. He took the phone, studying the text. Then his eyes flicked up to her. "You said someone was watching you." She nodded frantically. "Yes. He was standing at the end of the street. He followed me to my apartment, and then he got inside." The officer exchanged a look with his colleague. "You're saying someone broke into your apartment?" "Yes." "Did you see him inside?" Claire hesitated. "No, but I heard him. He was there. I got a text right before I ran." The officer sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "All right, we'll send someone to check out your place." He gestured to a chair. "Sit tight." Claire nodded, slumping into the nearest seat. Her hands curled into fists as she tried to slow her breathing. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, another officer approached. "Miss Carter," she jumped up. "Did you find him?" The officer shook his head. "We searched your apartment. No sign of forced entry. No one inside." Her stomach twisted. "But there was someone there." The officer exchanged another glance with his colleague. "There's no sign of him now. Are you sure you weren't just—" He hesitated. "Are you sure you didn't imagine it?" Claire's blood ran cold. She wanted to scream, to shake them, but their skeptical expressions made her hesitate. "I didn't imagine it," she said, voice low. "I know what I saw." The officer exhaled. "We'll file a report. Maybe install some extra patrols in your area." That was it? That was all they were going to do? Frustration and fear tangled inside her, but she knew arguing wouldn't change anything. She left the station an hour later, exhaustion pressing down on her. A cab dropped her off a block away from her building. She hesitated before heading inside, glancing up at the dark windows of her apartment. Nothing seemed out of place, but the unease still clung to her. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped inside. Silence greeted her. The air was still, undisturbed. Maybe the police were right. Maybe whoever it was had left. Maybe she was safe. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Then she pulled out her phone, intending to delete the unknown number from her messages. But when she unlocked the screen, a new message awaited her. Unknown number. "They won't help you." Her breath caught. Unknown number. "See you soon." Claire's fingers went numb. Her ears rang. The apartment suddenly felt like a cage, like something unseen lurked just beyond her vision. Then, the closet door in her bedroom, the one she swore had been shut when she left, was open. A breath of air shifted through the room, so slight she might have imagined it. But she knew she wasn't alone. Not anymore.